Last Christmas, my friends and I got together. We drank alcohol and told scary stories like when we were young. Naturally, it was all in jest, and no one was scared. Having listened to our stories enough, I wanted to refresh myself a little and sober up at the same time. I left the table, quickly got dressed, grabbed a pack of cigarettes lying on the balcony, and went outside. Outside, the fresh air breathed some relief into my inebriated body. I wanted to smoke, but the traitorous pack was empty. Damn it! I cursed and threw the pack on the sparkling snow. I turned around to go back to the table, but suddenly I heard the clomping of women's heels or something else. The next moment I was startled. A heavy hand patted me on the back, and I shrieked in surprise. I turned around and saw a tall man, which was strange enough. I expected to see a girl. He was wearing a long coat, and his face was a little different from human and looked more like a dog's face. And here we stand in the light of a dim lantern and look at each other. And then I'm not ashamed to ask, "Do you have a cigarette?" He looked at me attentively and took out of his inner pocket some old crumpled cigarette. Well, if there are no other options, I thought, and lit up. When the stranger was buttoning his coat, I noticed that he had neither a jacket nor a t-shirt, only a bare, very hairy torso. This made me kind of disgusted, and I turned away. I don't know how much time passed while we smoked in silence, but this silence began to frighten me, and I asked mockingly, "Where did you get so hot from?" In response, there was only silence and a smirk on his face. This ignoring began to irritate me, and I was going to root him, but did not have time. The gloomy silhouette of this man was already moving away in the direction of the old district cemetery. I didn't give any meaning to it then, and my body already craved for a new portion of alcohol, and I went back to the table to my friends. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, my legs began to braid, and alcohol was already hitting my head. My friends were not in the best condition, and it was decided to go home. I left before the others, and the shortest way was just past the cemetery. Naturally, it was a bit scary to go. My friends' horror stories kept popping up in my head, and the frosty fog added to the atmosphere. Coming to the end of the cemetery, I heard the merry laughter of the men. I was not even surprised by the fact that at such a time there could be someone here. I was happy to see any living person. Walking another 30 meters, I saw them. The men were sitting at the memorial table and drinking vodka under the funny stories of the oldest of them. There was also my acquaintance, who bought me a cigarette. Apparently, they had been sitting there for a long time. There was a tablecloth on the table, and they had wrapped their feet in blankets to keep warm. When they saw me, they called me happily to them. It's a quiet neighborhood. It's not customary to refuse. So I agreed and obediently sat down at their table. I was treated to vodka and various appetizers. I sat with them for about an hour until I dropped my fork. Everyone looked at me closely, silently looked at each other, and continued the conversation. And the fork was still lying there. It wouldn't pick itself up. I went under the table to get it. Then a chill ran down my back. One of them had a hoof peeking out from under the blanket. I picked up my fork and walked away from the table, saying I had to go to the bathroom. As soon as I was out of their sight, I started running. I've never run so fast in my life. And then I was very much afraid. Adrenaline hit my head, completely expelling alcohol. Behind my back galloped as if a herd of horses. My heart was pounding and my hands were numb. Running across the bridge, I caught a glimpse of an old hut. In it lived a crazy grandfather who called himself the sorcerer. Running up to the hut, I started to break the door with shouts. The front door opened and I fell into the hut. Under my cries of "Close the damn door," my grandfather pushed the old latch and hung a huge barn lock on it. Grandpa ordered me to close all the windows, and he began to recite a prayer as if he had already realized what had happened. At that moment, the door shook from the hoofbeats. The devils were rushing to us, and I was huddled in the corner, afraid that the door was about to fail. The adrenaline rush made me pass out. I was brought back to life by the dawn and the first rooster cries. Everything was quiet, and the lock was still on the door. The sun was shining through the window. My grandfather was pouring tea and looking at me with a smile. "What are you sitting there for? You remembered the devil yourself. Don't be afraid, the time of devils is over," said the grandfather. I quickly drank my mug of tea and calmed down a bit. We went outside. The door had scratches and a few dents. I was very lucky, as the door would most likely have been me if it had been me. Years later, I still didn't realize who they were. Did the devils really come for Christmas?